It is now time for another interview from the backlot. This episode's guest, Jill Six, director of The Stylist. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are on Backlot 605. I am Casey Kelderman, joined with my co-host Brian Mensing, and here we are today with the producer, writer, director, Jill Six from The Stylist, a brand new horror film here from the last year. Jill, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. Just finished cutting my last client's hair for the evening. They left alive, I will say that.
Now, this is your side of the story. We hadn't got theirs.
Yeah. I mean,
You may never get their side.
The opening of the film is very much, besides the bad part, the fact like being the last person working, I'm diving way too deep right now, but that's very real. I was like, that happens all the time. This could totally be believable.
Well, go ahead. Well, I was just to say is, just going into the movie and whatnot, that to me seemed very much in terms of like any service industry, whether it be like just before the salon closes. Oh, can I get my hair cut? Really? We're supposed to close in like 2 minutes. Or like that restaurant that's like, I'm just brought in the 7 people because we're hungry at 5 minutes before it closed kind of thing. Like, so many people run into this, and this is kind of like your version of, well, this is how my brain tweaks the story as it happens to me.
No, what I was going to say is kind of as we're going to jump into the movie a bit here, and I'll ask Jill to give a plot description and everything like that. But I guess we'll start there, and then I'll jump into my first question right after. So, Jill, for the people that don't know what The Stylist is, what it's about, obviously we have touched on it is about a hairstylist, which you are yourself. Can you jump into a little bit of the plot for everybody that might not know what this movie is about?
Well, it's about a hairstylist who scalps people and wears their hair as an attempt to escape her inner turmoil. But the film itself is kind of about that routine she's been doing for so long being kind of come to a halt by this person coming into her life, and she's attempts to kind of fix herself or rehab herself out of this horrible addiction, and maybe that doesn't go so well, actually.
So that the first question I want to jump into is, as far as the story for the movie goes, obviously it's pretty simple to pick up how you came up with the story. You are a hairstylist yourself, but what about the overall horror themes of this movie? Because there are different ways you could have gone about telling a hair salon centered horror story, but you jump in, like you said, right away. She scalps people, and you get that right away in this movie too, of what this movie's about. Where did you come up with this concept for? What was it? Something you always kind of thought of, like maybe, I don't want to say cutting someone's hair, but as a horror director yourself, where does this type of concept come up for you?
Well, it kind of first just started me thinking, how is there not already like a hairstylist slasher? And I was more thinking like in the vein of a lot of the kind of early 90s. I feel like job themed slashers, like there was the dentist, Dr. Giggles, like the landlady, all these the profession slasher type movies. And so that's first where it started, but then I just started to jot down ideas, and I just envisioned her as kind of a Leatherface-esque. I just thought like, well, what does she do? She takes people's hair. That just seemed like that must be what she would do. And I pictured it as like a Leatherface-ish thing, in a sense of like she puts them on and like emulates that person to try to like escape her own mind, which I kind of feel like, Leatherface we never really see out of a mask, but we see him in different personalities when he puts the different masks on in the film. And so like that basic concept kind of was like, she'll be my like female hairstylist. Leatherface was like the very seed of it. And I just realized like I love slashers, and we do lots of definite like nods to that when we get to the kills and stuff, but I really have a love for like anti-hero films and films about, like really complicated people, especially films about like normally who would be the villain in a story. And
Mhm.
um how that makes you feel when you get to know them more and realize they're more than just, the bad things they do. They're more than just a monster. And I'm just really interested in like how that makes us feel so conflicted about people. And it's just not that simple of like good and bad. Of course, I'm not trying to defend the bad things she does either, but I just like things that aren't that easy to, decide how you feel about it. I will go on a rant. I don't even know where I began there. I'm sorry.
So Casey, so she goes,
Mhm.
Jill, you bring up that, kind of part of the inspiration between just being a hairstylist itself, but going to like the Leatherface route aspect of it. Did you kind of pick up on that kind of thing? I picked up a different vibe to me personally, outside of just the story itself, whatever. But with the scalping and everything like that, I picked up like the Buffalo Bill, like the Silence of the Lambs. Like, what would Buffalo
Yeah.
Bill look like after he got done with the girls in the wells, kind of thing? What was he doing when he was making those suits and stuff like that? So, like, were you was it straight just like Leatherface, or was it anything that was kind of taken from other places? Because between like that aspect of it and just the way that she acted and when she was in her own head, I got the single white female thing, especially when she
Yeah.
latches on to Brea Grant. So I was just curious if you if is that the only where you were going with it, or like where I'm having a bad way of
Like
trying to
like
explain. Yes.
other influences maybe.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's a mix of a lot of things. And then you bring the fact that you bring up Buffalo Bill, I really kind of view, like all these Leatherface and Buffalo Bill both based on the same real guy, Ed
Mhm.
Gein. And so I think there's a lot of these really the psychology behind Ed Gein or Gein, I'm not sure it's pronounced every which way that I've
Mhm.
heard, but I feel like there's so many killers and characters in film, in history, Norman Bates also based on him. I think all those characters share the same type of psychology, and so they're all kind of influence her in that way because they're all like skin wearers to dealing with like major repression and major identity issues.
Mhm.
And so she was kind of connected to all those people. I kind of think Maniac has the same mentality. And I think
Yep.
May was a big influence. Lucky McKee's May.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like all these characters have a very similar feeling to me. So yeah, it's a lot of those people. And then you bring up single white female. What's funny is somehow I hadn't seen that. And one of the very early drafts of the script, someone read and they were like, "Oh my God, this is like a much more horror version of single white female."
Mm-hmm.
So I watched it and I was like, it really is. Even like the hair thing, I was like
Yeah.
freaked out when she changed her hair and discovered, yeah, there's this whole like world of like thrillers about obsession and especially
Mm-hmm.
about women obsessing with another woman almost to the point of wanting to become them. And yeah, went through this whole like discovered a lot of films through kind of preparing for this, all in that theme, like
Mhm.
way back to like even Persona or Robert Altman's Three Women, which has Sissy Spacek and Shelley Duvall in it. But like there's tons of films about that, like women obsessed with another woman, almost wanted to like they become one.
Mhm.
And there's this whole world of that stuff. I love that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like obviously this is first and foremost it's a slasher horror movie, and but one thing you have in this movie is this really complex relationship between these two women, and that's what I found really most fascinating. As you know, that's something you kind of don't think of all the time. Is everybody gets a haircut. Everybody gets a haircut, no matter who you go to. If you have
Mm-hmm.
your mom do it at home, or you actually go to a stylist, and there's always this relationship that you do have with your stylist, whether that be that's your person you've gone to for the last 20 years, or it's a different person every single time. But there is sort of this weird dichotomy, this weird relationship between the two. Personally for yourself, integrating that into the movie, what was like some of the experiences or ideas that you wanted to throw in from your own personal life as a stylist into this movie, into the characters?
Yeah, I really wanted to show like, yeah, that unique relationship that people have with, hairstylists, especially if you've been going, to the same person for a decade plus,
Mm.
and how, or even people that come in for the first time, how much they might share with you, and you don't know, this person just like will just spill their whole life the first
Mhm.
time they sit in your chair. So something about that environment that makes people feel comfortable. I read one thing about it I found really interesting that said, like, part of the theory is that it's, unlike other professions that are similar where, like, the stuff is done, like, in a closed room, like a massage or face like, facials and stuff like that. They say it's something about how a hairstylist is, it's, like, public, but it is physical, like, there's physical interaction. It is, like, kind of like it's not to be creepy, but it is like you, like, take care of someone and make them feel good, so it's like I feel like it's a psychological thing that goes into it that
Mhm.
makes us feel comfortable. I even, as on my side of it, tell my clients more than I feel like makes sense, like, more than I
Mhm.
would maybe someone I'm close with. But I really wanted to, yeah, kinda show that in a film, and I wanted other hairstylists to feel represented in that way, be like, just there's a whole world that we've never really seen a movie about a hairstylist, whether it's any genre, maybe. I don't know.
So that dialogue you talk about between you and like the client and whatnot, especially like that early on, that very beginning scene and whatnot. Did you take anything from experiences of clients that you've worked with to kind of create that part of like the characters, like the clients coming in before we get to our main focused character and whatnot? Those couple early one-offs. Is that any sort of influence, or is that just kind of
Yeah.
this is kind of how I see like some of you know, the snooty type or whatnot, or is it just more of, you know, experience versus
Mhm.
just an idea?
Some was like real, like very real people, but I almost wouldn't want them to know that. But like
Right.
experiences of like just I actually really like that my job I get to like I feel like it's a good thing for a writer to be something like a hairstylist because I meet so many different people and get to know people that maybe wouldn't be in my social circle normally, and it's like a great way to study just humans. And but like I remember one person that's the client's like barely even in the film, so I don't know if the moment really gets across. But there's the kind of people that sit in your chair and talk to you like everyone in their life, like they reference everyone by
Mhm.
first name, and you're their cousin or something, so you
Mhm.
already know who all these people are, and they're like, Sam and how he acts, and I'm like, I actually have no idea what you're talking. I'm like, yeah, he's always like that. But it's like those people that are just like assume you already know their entire world and talk to you like they do, which I think is like kind of crazy but funny. I incorporated that into one
Mhm.
of the characters, and then just like also the kind of people who like are just on their phone and don't say a word to you the whole time, or there's just so many different kinds of interactions you have. I normally let as myself as a stylist kind of vibe off how they are. I don't like force a conversation because I remember being younger and like hating that when I'd sit down and
Mhm.
like if they
Hmm.
want to talk, we'll talk. If not, we can just hang out. It's fine. I'm fine with silence
Mhm.
too.
So speaking a bit of like influences on this movie, what as a horror fan for yourself, like what are some of the movies that have influenced you as a fan, and then going into like directing as well, just in terms of wanting to make films? What are some of the influences that you've had?
Man, it's so hard to pick out favorite movies and stuff like that, but I feel like a movie that I mean, Texas Chainsaw, I always already
Hmm.
brought up as my favorite horror film of all time, but, I'd say, like, Scream had such an influence on me because of the time it came out. I was, like, 11, 12 years old, and that was almost like I'd already been watching film horror movies for a couple years too young. Maybe that was more like 12, 13. I can't remember how old I was when Scream came out, but it was almost like an education in the horror films I didn't know about yet because it's, full of nods to all kinds of
Hmm.
slashers. And I feel like that's what really got me into like learning about the filmmaking. And before that, I would just watch movies and never thought about like who made them. Um, It's weird. Yeah, I didn't, not to probably tell then, but it's interesting because Scream is nothing like anything I've made, but it was such an influence on me. But like, as far as other big films that come to mind, I was like, the original Candyman's one of my favorites. I really like films about that have villains that can also be sympathetic, which I find him like horrifying and sympathetic at the same time. Same with Leatherface. Yeah, I'm always attracted to the sad, scary people. I always loved sad movies growing up, like morbidly, like loved. If a movie made me cry, I was like, this is awesome. Like when I discovered that was possible, I would fell in love with it. I was like, I want to watch every sad movie. That's so morbid. As like a 5-year-old, I was like, I want to cry and watch movies.
Everybody likes to cry at a good movie.
Yeah.
I guess the next thing I kind of want to lean into, just because I don't want to spoil anything, but just to throw something out there. We talked briefly before we started recording about the new Candyman, and something me and Brian have talked about is the final shot of that movie is like, oh yeah, like that's an amazing final shot. I feel the exact same way about your film here, The Stylist, of like, oh yeah, that's an amazing last shot, but it's also like, oh no, that's horrifying as well. And that's one thing about this movie. You have so many incredible shots in this movie, and that's one thing that I really took away from it is how incredibly well each slasher kill is done in this movie. I mean, I guess how to lead that into a question is like, what was kind of your direction going into those? Is it taking a little bit of influence, obviously, from those movies like Scream or Candyman, and throwing kind of your own little flair in? Is it kind of something like you've always thought of something like this happening and just hadn't seen it on film before?
It's a mix, for depending on the scenes. Like for the end that you bring up is something that I always imagined. Once I knew the end narratively when we were writing it, I always knew I wanted. I don't think this spoils anything, but I wanted it to end and begin on the stylist face, Claire's face. Like this movie is about her, and so it should. I always knew it'd be like a close up in the beginning and the end in like totally different mental states.
So she starts sad and ends happy, but not necessarily in a good sense of why she is in that particular mindset.
Which I feel like it could be interpreted the opposite. Like the beginning, she's happy because she's about to do something that she has planned out, and it's going to go out as it's supposed to, and then the end is like maybe not exactly what she hoped, but she had to have known that's how it was going to go somewhere deep down. But as far as the cinematography, I worked with a guy named Robert Patrick Stern. He worked on the short version of The Stylist with me too, and so we've been like marinating on this idea for 5 years between the two projects, and spent a lot of time once we finally were in pre-production for the feature, really developing like a language for the camera, and like, what does it mean when we do a zoom? What does it mean when the camera does this? And so we like created this idea of the movie is really about Claire's like downward spiral into total madness. And so with each like kill, we designed like each one kind of ups the ante as far as the gore, plus they're getting messier and like less in control. And so the camera reflected that idea too. Like we got closer to the gore with each kill. We like drug it out longer with each one. There's like this progression from everything from the gore to how we shot it to the music, like everything's connected because to the narrative and how it's changing. Like that first kill is like all organized, how this is how Claire normally does it, and then without being spoilery, they progressively get much more out of control. Yeah. And by the last one, we were kind of in a vibe of like this mixture of like post after Carrie's burnt down the prom vibe and like a Natural Born Killers thing, because like this is like as gritty and crazy as she's ever been when my cameo kind of comes around. But yeah, we really I'm a dork about planning out those kind of details, especially with the camera work.
the one thing I will certainly say for the ending, and as everything progressively gets more and more as it does throughout the film, the one thing I actually did like about it, and I think that's what gives that ending the super punch that it has, is that that's the one we don't get to see. That's the one where we just get to kind of assume and get to kind of picture how did that basically end up happening? Because at that point, all we basically get is Claire in the end, and we don't get to see, the aftermath of that last one. So to me, I think, that kind of brings it up more because you're left in suspense of not knowing exactly what happened. From at least for me anyway. Did you intentionally leave that one out? As you progress with these kills with the narrative, or how did that all go about to kind of give for that last reveal at the end?
Yeah, I felt like I wanted that last moment to be really as powerful as it could be. I knew that, people are gonna assume something is coming, and this is the end of a very bad journey. So, like, there's no way this is gonna end with a happy ending. So I was worried. I never wanted to feel like a twist or anything, of course, but um I wanted to like, yeah, really build. We like really drug out the wedding scene, made it
Mhm.
try to make it feel like real time, like you're really watching everyone walk down, to build that dread
Hmm.
of like, did this really happen? And I just felt like showing it would just take away from it. Almost would be too much. Like, it wouldn't. I wanted it to be a very emotional ending, and you'd be there with Claire. And I feel like if we show that, then it would really turn you away. It's really almost protecting Claire, like making you still be able to sympathize with her. And would have just taken it to a grosser place. Like,
Mhm.
it just didn't seem necessary for what we were trying to say, or like for Claire's story. Because I don't even think Claire is proud of that. So we don't want to show it. As weird as that sounds, like I sound
Hmm.
like Claire's
Mhm.
become very real to me. Like, it felt like that would be right to show that part, and it just would be a different kind of
Mhm.
ending.
Another through line in this movie that really like stood out, I mean, is obviously her kind of her descent even into madness, but even more so looking at the stylization of this movie is her costumes throughout the movie. Her wardrobe is immaculate throughout this movie, and I'm like, as a guy, I usually don't point out those things or don't ever think of those, but but in this movie, it was so prominent and so ingrained kind of in this story. What was it like trying to put all those costumes together for yourself as the director for for the movie, and giving Claire all these different costumes and clothes to wear throughout the movie?
Thank you so much. I love the wardrobe so much.
Hmm.
It was done by a woman named Hallie Sharp, and honestly, on our budget, like, I show her my, like, dream plan for the wardrobe, and I was like, "I don't know how we'll do this," like, because she really it's funny, like, the breaking down of all these departments, like props and costume. I didn't realize how big the project was till I sat down with her, and she's like, "Just Claire alone has, like, 20 plus outfits that she needs for the movie." I'm like, "Oh my god." This is why people told me this was, like, not a small budget film a long time ago. Um, but yeah, we had this idea, which correlates with, like, the color palette of the film, or, like, the color palettes, but that Claire, we'd give her, like, this very specific color palette, which was influenced by The Short, of all those, like, yellows and kinda 70s-esque
Hmm.
colors. And we, like, really leaned into that idea, like, we could make her, if her house was that way, her wardrobe and her salon, but everything else was, like, modern and cool colors, especially all of Olivia's life, Brea Grant's character. We wanted them to be opposites, but also so that Claire would, like, stand out anywhere she was in the real world, like the coffee shop or just walking down the street. She almost looks like she's been transported from, like, another time, um, was, like, our idea. And from the beginning, we're like, if this movie's about called The Stylist, about a hairstylist, it's gonna be, like, just create, like, over the top with style on in every aspect we
Hmm.
can do. And, I'm just so happy with, yeah, the way that not only the color palette, but the even the wardrobe design is very, like, a mixture of like 70s meets Clueless wardrobe. And it was like my dream, all these outfits she put. Some of them were so great. I was like, this outfit is so cool. And it's only in a scene for like 5 seconds. I can't stand it. Like there's a scene where Claire's sitting on the bench being super creepy, spying, and the outfit she's wearing there is like so over the top. Like when she walked out, I was like, what the hell? I loved it so much, but it's insane. We call that scene French Claire because she's wearing like a yellow like French hat. Beret. And yeah, I love the wardrobe. It's a dream come true. Hallie like nailed. And like that's such a talent with people that in all these departments, not only do they know how to put it together, but they know how to like figure these like dream visions on like, the tiniest budgets. I still don't know how we did it.
It's better than her just taking that piece of paper and going, no, we're going to cut right here.
Yeah. we even somehow made like 2 custom wedding dresses. Oh God, I'm spoiling things. 1 wedding dress for the film. But yeah, people told me so long ago not to make this as my first film because of how the concept is big. And once I started to break it down, I realized why. I'm like, oh God, like we're planning a wedding within a movie. What are we doing?
You get a wedding dress pretty cheap. You do it right.
Yeah.
Weddings alone, they're cheap enough that you can just do them in real life. It can't be that expensive to do it in a movie.
Then you have to worry, is there going to be blood on it? If there's blood in any scene, we have 5 doubles of the costumes, and then you never end up using the doubles, and it's like, why do we buy them? Just in case.
You never know.
What was kind of like you said, jumping from shorts to a feature? What was the biggest jump from that for you as a director?
Oh man, it was probably working with really big scenes with like tons of extras plus like 8 main characters. On every short film I maybe only have like 4 people at most in a scene, and I've never dealt with like had to have a sea of extras to feel like a bar or a church, and just every added thing. I'm a very anxious person. I don't know if that's a quality in a lot of directors, but everything added to it adds to the stress level. But I was so afraid of those scenes, but what I learned through this process is with a feature, we also had a way bigger crew than I'm used to working with. I'm doing like my own assistant director, picking up my own food on short films and all that stuff. So with this, we had such a big team that I realized there's actually people who are in charge of, placing the extras and giving them my direction. I don't have to talk to like 100 people before every take and tell them what to do or figure out where they should stand and all these things. And so it was really like, once we did it, it was all relieving. Like, okay, I can do this. There's like a chain of like in place, and I trust all these people. It was like an incredible experience to work with this group, honestly.
How tight of a? I was just curious, as in terms of trying to coordinate and get everything kind of situated. What kind of time frame were you guys kind of structured into? Was this a relatively quick, short kind of thing, or did you have like the breathing room that way? If you had things that you had to kind of tweak along the way, that you were kind of given that ability to kind of make it more fluid as you went along.
Well, we actually spent like a really good amount of time in pre-production so that we could map out our shoot very tight, because we shot that consecutively for 19 days. We had days off, but it was like a month of shooting. But we spent like 6 months in pre-production, like in serious pre-production, not just like kind of talking about it, but like already blocking scenes, like 3 months in the locations before we were even shooting. So I think when you put the serious time into planning is when you then give yourself, once you're on the day, you have that like structure behind you to know like that's there. Now we can experiment more, which is more my style than going with the flow. I'm very like, we have a shot list, scheduled by the 30 minutes increments for the day, because you don't know how you're going to make your days otherwise. But yeah, the amount of time to shoot sadly comes down to just like what your budget is, because we'd have shot the movie for 40 days if we could have afforded it, and could have used the time for sure. Like the wedding scene we shot in 2 days. That's kind of psychotic. That should have been like at least 4 days, if not a week. The end of the movie is very important, a lot of stress, but it ended up being a dream situation. But I'm all stressed, like spend as much time as you can in pre-production, and it makes the rest of the thing, even post-production, much smoother because you've already thought all of that out.
There's one other thing I want to throw out there in terms of, like, again, we brought up the style of the stylist is, again, in the opening scene, and we get it throughout the movie, is the slow motion of someone getting getting a haircut. What was your thought process of that? Of I'm gonna slow this down. I'm gonna make it all slow motion. It's gonna be kind of a little more artistic and have a little bit more style to it than what you might expect.
Yeah, the idea was like to give it this like elegance and romance almost. From the short, we always wanted it to have this elegance through the whole thing, even when we go to the gore.
Mm-hmm.
But the slow-mo started in the short film, which we had the same editor, John Pata, in all the hair washing and the blow drying. I just envisioned that, like, she like almost worships hair. So like this process would be like almost religious for her. Is the idea, or in romantic.
Mm-hmm.
And so we expanded that much more in the feature, that it's like even beyond just the hair stuff in slow-mo. Even she would get caught in these moments where she's kind of just staring at someone's hair, and we would slow it down, like people walking by her on the street, or someone else in the salon getting their hair done. And we actually named them. We called them Claire trances. It was part of like our camera language we created. We're like, this happens when she's, forgets that she's still in the real world, and she's just like fixated on someone's hair, and then she snaps out of these trances. But yeah, it was just it's funny, like we have there's probably like 3 or 4 of the hair montages in the
Mm-hmm.
feature. The last one, like at the wedding, when she's doing her hair right before the wedding. And we did want them to change throughout. Like the last one, we kind of mixed with it not just being hair, it being like Claire's focus is now like everyone else, and like what's going on around her, and she's losing focus on what she used to
Mm-hmm.
care about. But yeah.
I'm gonna kind of transition into my fun last question I always like to ask, and it's because it's a movie we talked about already, and I always like to I'll throw the question out first, and then I'll throw out my answer. But the question is, Jill, with the stylist, I always like to ask our guests and on our podcast, what's your dream double feature with this movie? So if you're gonna show the stylist, what's another movie you'd like to have play alongside of it?
There's so many I would like to do that with. And I've had a couple of my dream scenarios happen. I've had Texas Chainsaw and it play together. But I don't even know. Some of them I'd be like, it's too similar, and then I'm just going to get called out for being a ripoff of a filmmaker.
You're not ripping off your paint homage. There's a difference.
I'll just call out mine then, just so I'll get thrown under the bus then. I would love to see this paired with Maniac. I would love to see Joe Spinell's having this double feature with the stylist. I think it would play perfectly. And again, there's enough difference between the two, obviously, and again, it's a very different type of movie too, where that one's just this nasty, dirty New York 1980s movie. Again, where yours is very much has this elegance to it, has a beauty to it, has this complete style that is of its own. So I think it's two movies that have a similar vibe, but two very different movies in terms of what they're going for.
I do love Maniac, and of course, there's no way to like deny the scalping, and even beyond the scalping, him like the mannequins at home and his shrine. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Claire's is just like, just a little bit more elegant version of his. Is like someone even said that they're like Someone recently said this to me, and it was so funny. They're like, her room is like if Maniac had an interior designer help him with his. And I'm like, that's kind of exactly what we were going for. He needed that feminine touch to his. I love that, but I love him too, like how he'd be crying with his mannequins, and even though he's like, it is much more grimy of a film, it's still sympathetic. I even really dig the remake and how it's like, I think it's smart that they put it in a totally different place with like an LA version of Maniac. It's like the perfect kind of redo of it with, instead of putting it in New York and doing the exact same thing again, it's like, here's like the slick, nerdy LA version of this same thing. Also very believable. Both creepy dudes. I've seen them both in real life, I feel like.
Makes me think whether or not I should be glad, be thankful, or sad that I have not seen these movies yet.
You need to watch both of them. They're incredible.
One random thing I'd like to, or a different double feature, and some films, but I'd love to see with like Neon Demon, because it has a lot of similarities, and I think a lot of people, Neon Demon doesn't get enough credit for like the fact that it's a horror film. Like it's a straight horror film. It's like, I don't know what people are thinking. But I love this whole world of kind of like, we share the themes of like the perfection and obsession and the beauty industry, and that was on my list of like films I had everyone kind of be thinking of and for influence as we were watching this or making this, watching it. I don't know what I'm saying.
I was going to say, that is a movie no one talks about anymore, is Neon Demon. It kind of came out, went. I think it's waiting for that cult following behind it. Then I guess the next thing I'm going to throw to you, Jill, is what's next? What do you have next? What's next for Jill in terms of filmmaking?
Man, I wish that I was making a new feature already. I'm dying to do that. I've got a couple features in different stages of, trying to get off the ground and actually start getting made. One that's with the writers of Porno that came out a couple years ago, the horror film, not just a random pornography video.
That's a whole different thing.
I'm sure they also have made those. No, I don't know. But a film with them, it's like films nothing I can talk about it yet, which is a bummer. But and I've got a project with Adam Caesar, who wrote Clown in a Cornfield. It's a big novel. And Jamie Nash, who wrote like Exists and Lovely Molly and lots of stuff that Ed Sanchez has made since Blair Witch. But I am excited. I'm making a very teeny tiny short thing here in the next couple weeks that the news will be coming out what it is next month. I can't talk about it. I'm so excited just to shoot something. It's been since The Stylist early 2020 that I've like been on set as a director.
You have to let us know when we can hear about that.
Oh, yeah. I will.
Absolutely, that's exciting to hear, and I just can only imagine what you'll do next, and how much it does have to feel like, oh, I need to make something right away, like I need to jump back into it.
One hint is keep an eye out for Arrow Video, and everyone should get an Arrow subscription. Is all I'm saying.
Nice.
If you don't already have it, because Stylist is on there, but yeah.
I'm gonna use that as the transition into Jill. Where can they find the Stylist?
Yes, well, we're streaming on Arrow's streaming channel, and you can also rent it on VOD. So, like Amazon, iTunes, all the places that it's rent or buy digitally.
Or you can buy it like I did.
Yeah, and we have also a limited edition Blu-ray that's like packed. It has a double-sided poster, freaking CD of the soundtrack, an obscene amount of special features that we made, like behind the scenes. We have a DVD. I also have to brag that a vinyl of our score.
I want that vinyl.
You can get it from Mondo or Burning Witches Records, and that's like, I can't believe that happened. That's the coolest thing ever. Our composer Nicholas Ehlert, I've been working with on short films for like 7 years, so I was like, it feels like I'm just so proud that this could happen for him and for us. It's just so cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm like, that's kind of a cool thing that I love. Just is coming back, and horror is really the one that pushing it of all these
Yeah.
amazing, incredible scores. And again, like that's one thing I guess we didn't talk about. The score of this movie is incredible as well. So I mean, to everyone out there listening, like
Thank you.
this is a must watch horror film. Please go check it out everywhere Jill said, including Arrow Video. So Jill, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a pleasure, and we can't wait to talk again.
Thank you for having me.